Welcome, everyone, to another week and another episode of All Elite Arcade, your home for video game discussions here at AEW Games. It's me, Evil Uno, and I'm here with my friends, the Chugs. How you doing, Chugs?
Yes, I'm doing wonderful. How are you, man?
You know what? It's been a busy week. In fact, you may realize I'm not at home right now. We're actually recording this episode much earlier than we typically would, so there might be some news pieces we miss. But I am traveling to Dynamite. I'm in my Dynamite hotel room. We are doing 2 TV shows this week, including Collision
you're a busy
tomorrow.
Man, you know.
I'm a busy man. But you know, I have an independent this week. I had mystery wrestling last week. I have an independent this weekend. I do a lot, including this podcast. But before we talk about our games that we've been playing this week, because that's what we do, we like to discuss the games that we've been putting time into. I actually want to talk about an AEW game that just came out on mobile. That's AEW Figure Fighters. So imagine stepping into the electrifying world of AEW, where every move, every decision, every triumph matters, all in the palm of your hand. That's what you could do with AEW Fight Forever. AEW Figure Fighters, AEW Fight Forever, obviously, our console game. Also purchase that while you're at it. It is a mobile gaming experience that puts you in control of your favorite AEW wrestlers like never before. Life-like representations of what we would be as action figures. Yourself, Chugs, is in there. I am in there. I'm very excited to be a part of a video game. This is now my 3rd mobile game I'm a part of. Just vying for that eventual release of a console game. But you can go and get AEW Figure Fighters if you go on iOS or Android and search AEW Figure Fighters. It is available now, and it is quite fun. Go and do that. Video games we've been playing this week. I honestly have only played 1 game, but I played a lot of it. So last week we talked a little bit Animal Well, where me and Dan Reichert kind of got really into, like, we were both about the same period of gameplay. We were maybe 5 or 6 hours in. I've put in 20 hours into the game, if not more now. And, you know, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, Animal Well is from the publisher Bigmode, which is the very first game from Bigmode, a new publishing wing of the YouTuber Video Game Dumpkey. He created this to essentially help promote indie games, and he thinks he has an eye for these video games, and so he has created a publishing company alongside his wife Leah. And I can tell you this, he has a great eye for video games, because I was talking very well of the game last week, and now I'm over 20 hours in. I'm going to say some stuff that is spoiler-ish, but also not a spoiler. I've seen credits. I think I've reached maybe credits within 7 hours. And now I've played another 16 hours post-credits.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Uno, first and foremost, that's very telling of how much you like the game.
Oh, yeah.
It took you about 7 hours to hit credits.
Yes.
And then you put another 16 post-credits?
Yes. And I honestly think so. The way it was explained to me in this game is that there is a surface level to the video game that you play, and I've reached that surface level. But then there is a secondary level that I think I understand how to get to. And then I was told that when you reach that level, there is a 3rd layer of the video game that is not very obvious to you at first. And it's been pretty impressive of a video game. I think we talked about it a little bit last week. It is I'd say 16-bit, you know, kind of like it looks like a very old retro game. It's made by one single person, made the music, made the coding, made the graphics single-handedly, and it is a game with no combat, where it's like a Metroidvania. You go through, you have to explore your map, but as you explore, you find new tools, and those tools will open up paths or will solve puzzles. But what makes this game so different with other things is that there is no text, there is nothing pointing you in a direction, so you can kind of tackle it the way you want. And the tools, unlike other Metroidvania games, have more than one use. And by more than one use, I don't mean like, you know, for example, there's a frisbee. The frisbee gets thrown. Well, there's several uses to the frisbee, and I will reveal a couple. But like, for example, it could be thrown and hit a thing. Great. It can also be thrown and bounce against 2 surfaces, which would mean those surfaces ignite over and over and over. So if you're throwing it between two switches, those switches will keep switching back and forth. Or you'll throw it and jump on it, and you can ride it a long distance into areas you wouldn't be typically able to. Or, for example, it's a lot of contextual stuff. So, like, if you walk into a screen and you see a dog, you might be able to stop the dog by throwing the frisbee at him. So, a lot of the tools have multiple uses to them. And when I finished the 7 hours, I thought to myself, I've played through the game and I think I've seen most of the map. How can there be that much more stuff? And now that I am 16 hours later into it, it is crazy how dense every area is with little secrets, multiple uses of the tools, multiple puzzles. There's an enormous amount of puzzles, and it's an extremely challenging game. So it's a challenging game in the sense that I don't think I could suggest the full experience to someone who isn't puzzle heavy. I think the surface level is great and everyone could tackle that, and it would still be challenging. It would still be fun to complete. But to get to the level where I'm at, I feel like it is quite challenging on a puzzle platformer basis. And I can't even tell you what the third layer is like. I'm genuinely cannot think of a game in the last few years that has made me feel so smart when I solve a puzzle. I talked about it last week, but The Witness was the last game I think that made me feel that way. This game has continued forward. It is still gorgeous. There is some genuinely frightful moments in this game, which is surprising because it has a very cute facade to it. You know, it is about animals, but there's occasional moments in it that are so out of left field that they become terrifying. And it's a very interesting game. And I think what's going to be super interesting about it is that when I complete this layer and try to figure out what the next layer is those discussions I'll have to have with other people about, like, did you find this? Did you find that? Like, even now, I'm texting with a chain of 3-4 different people, and they're all getting different tools at different times. And some of them reached places before me, and I could not even understand how that tool was acquired, where to get it. There's a whole side branching puzzle that I just found that involved a ton of contextual codes that you have to just, as you walk into a world, into a map, like into one of like the different rooms, there'll be occasional markings on the wall. And I was thoughtful enough at the time to be like, oh, I should mark this down in a notepad. And now 20 hours into the game, those moments are paying off because those are actually useful. And so it's been very, very cool. I could speak hours about this game, and I will probably play. Oh, go ahead, please.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say. So, is there like a deep-seated lore to this game as well, where you kind of discover? Like, is there a very definitive story, or is it more just puzzle related?
It is puzzle related, and it seems to be more of a broad approach to like.
Sure.
It's hard to tell because I think there's definitely a backstory and there's definitely a story as you without saying much. There like some parts of the animal interactions make you realize that okay, there might be a second layer to this that involves maybe an afterlife or something. But I reached a part after credits that made me think like, okay, why did I get to this thing? And how does it relate to everything else? So I can't tell you definitely, but I bet you there'll be a bunch of lore videos out there, which I know for you is stuff that you're into for sure. And I know I will for sure when I'm done. I'm probably going to try and like dissect this game through like video essays and stuff. But yeah, I've been loving it. I wouldn't be surprised if next week we do a podcast and I talk to you about the next 20 hours because I know it's a sign of a good game when I go to bed and I dream about that video game. And exactly. I've reached that point with Animal Well for sure.
That's so awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, because, you know, speaking of one person making a game, I'm wearing an Undertale t-shirt today for our video listeners, Toby Fox, the one and only creator of Undertale. So I really appreciate the fact that again, one person decided to make such an intricate and exciting game. Again, Uno, I've said this before. I said it last week. I'll say it again. You've sold me. I definitely have to try this game for sure.
Yeah, and you should play it on Steam Deck. An incredible, like, handheld game for sure.
Yeah, which is even more perfect, especially for when I start traveling a lot more, again, for sure. But so as far as the games that I'm going through at the moment, there are two big ones that I've been going through at the moment. One is Dark Souls 2, which I can get into here in a minute. But the other one is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, the newest Prince of Persia title, which is this amazing Metroidvania that just received so many incredible reviews. I mean, I saw across the board, people are calling this one of the greatest Metroidvania games of all time, and I'm starting to understand why. It's not just because of the incredible voice acting. Seriously, the voice acting of these characters, specifically the main character, is so well done that it really, really brings you into the story for sure, which for me, story is so important within video games. And again, I love the excitement of Metroidvanias where you'll go to one room and you can't really reach a certain point, and then you explore later on, and then you get an ability where you can then further advance in that area. So Prince of Persia is amazing in that sense. But the big thing that grabbed me about Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is the combat. The intricacy of the combat is absolutely out of this world. The amount of combos, moves, when you unlock a new ability, there's like 3 or 4 different moves per se that you can use with that ability. Like it's been so fascinating as far as the combat goes, which is both exciting and then incredibly intimidating. Imagining like what the end game bosses are going to be like. Like I can only imagine how tough these end game bosses are going to be. But Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, it deserves every single piece of hype that it's gotten. What an amazing Metroidvania. And then again, in addition to that, I am going through Dark Souls 2 because I mentioned to you earlier about with Animal Well, about asking about the lore. And again, it's notorious that within Dark Souls, there is lore, but you really have to dig for it, whether that's in item descriptions or watching YouTube videos of people explaining the lore behind the game. But Dark Souls 2, in a lot of ways, it's not necessarily regarded as the best Dark Souls game. And I totally understand that. Dark Souls 2 is by no means my favorite Dark Souls game, but I think there's a certain charm to Dark Souls 2. I love so many of the areas specifically, and I'll stand by this. This may be controversial. This may be controversial, Uno. But Majula is the best hub area in the entire Dark Souls series.
Of every title.
Of every title.
Whoa.
I mean it. The theme, how beautiful the area is. I love, like, I have the Majula, the Dark Souls 2 hub area. I have that song downloaded on my phone. Like, I love the hub area of Dark Souls 2. So it's a really, really interesting game. One of the big challenges for sure is there's this ability that you can level up, which is called adaptability, which actually determines the iframes in which that you roll. I think I maybe mentioned this
yes, you did
before.
mention it. Yep.
But I've increased it quite a bit as time has gone on. So the enemies and the bosses have gotten a little bit easier for me because I've improved that. But just those two games, to me, I'm having an absolute blast playing those.
You know, when it comes to third-person action games like those, if it wasn't for the fact that it's From Software that created it and their bar is so high, I feel like more people would be championing Dark Souls 2. But because they've had such a lineage of incredible games, it just doesn't, to a lot of people, I know you're enjoying it for sure, but it just doesn't seem to reach the bar that has been set. I think Dark Souls 1 is incredible and well crafted, and or Demon Souls, if you will, and it's just, I wouldn't say perfect, but it is incredibly hard. But once you see the patterns, you can figure it out and you can address them. I think Dark Souls 2 is not as finely tuned as the first game, but is still an incredible game. And I don't want to poo-poo on all of these other third-person games, but like I still like Dark Souls 2 over like, let's say, a Neo or you know, a lot of the Team Ninja games. From Software makes an incredible game, and Dark Souls 2 is no exception for sure.
You know, because I'll stand by this. I think overall, as far as a world or a universe, I stand by the fact that I think Dark Souls 1, rightfully so, deserves all the credit. As far as having, like, the most incredible world, as far as an interconnected world. Like, I'll never forget the moment where I went through an area and I opened this door and went down an elevator, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm back at Firelink Shrine.
Yes.
Like, how did I get here? That was so mind-blowing to me at the time, because I'd never experienced anything like that before. But I do think gameplay-wise, Dark Souls 3 is king. As far as the Dark Souls games, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, Dark Souls 3, gameplay-wise, I'll even say this, bosses-wise. I think the bosses in Dark Souls 3 are just the best. Now, I'm very biased because Dark Souls 3 was the first Dark Souls game that I played and completed, so I have a soft spot for it. But I stand by it. I think the gameplay to this day, I was actually replaying it the other day just for fun, and that game still holds up. It's an amazing title.
I haven't completed Dark Souls 3 all the way through because those late game bosses are incredible, but some of them are so tough, tough. And but they're really epic battles. They're ginormous. You know, I should really go back and give it more of a try. But at that time I was like, this is my level cap. I can't possibly get through this. But you know, I've completed Elden Ring since then, so I probably could go back. There's been harder bosses in Elden Ring. I'm almost sure of it.
Yes.
You know what? I'm gonna go back to Dark Souls 3. This is it. I've decided.
You should. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, you know, something that's very understated from the Dark Souls game that you brought up is that sense of connectivity between the map, where you think you're doing one thing and then you realize that everything you've done reconnects to your starting area. And not to bring it back to Animal Well, but Animal Well has so many of those moments where you something I really like about video games is that sense of realizing when another world is actually just parallel to where you are, and it is much closer to it than you realize. And there's a few moments I've felt in Animal Well. Obviously, it's more of a Metroidvania, and you could see the map. Vastly different from the Dark Souls series. But like, I've had a few moments where I've gone through something and I'd be like, oh my God, this connects to over here? Like, that changes everything. Dark Souls is filled with those. Bloodborne has the same thing. I remember when you finally come back to that first starting area from those opening gates up the ladder, you're like, oh my God, I'm back here. How did I get there? I love you. We talk so much about these games, but man,
I know.
I have to go back. June is so close. We're so close. I have to jump back in.
I can only imagine how incredible this Elden Ring DLC is going to be. It's at this point, I am convinced, like guaranteed, like I would bet a ton of money that the Elden Ring DLC is going to be incredible. It's just there's no question in my mind.
It has to be.
Yeah, just based on the reputation and how amazing these games are. I mean, the Elden Ring DLC, I can only imagine how incredible the bosses, the world, the new areas are going to be. It's going to be incredible. I cannot wait.
If you're a constant listener to our podcast, we're very sorry because, you know, we've already spent several weeks talking From Software.
That's my fault. Yeah.
But heads up, if you're listening to this in the future, I guarantee you June is filled with even more of it. You know, we're going to talk From Software for the next few weeks, but we're also going to be talking about the news right after this. And we're back. Hey, we're talking the weekly news. It is now the second week of May. Like I said, we are actually recording this a little earlier than usual, so there might be some news pieces we miss. If that is the case, we will address them in next week's All Elite Arcade. Some quick stuff before we get into some meaty news pieces. Braid Anniversary Edition is coming out. Braid is the first game by Jonathan Blow, who made The Witness that we talked a whole lot about last week. This new version has 15 hours of dev commentary, including commentary about how you could start your own game and what his processes were. Updated visuals, updated sound effects and music, and brand new puzzles. And it was released yesterday, or when yesterday, I think, when we're recording. But it is available now. I haven't jumped in quite yet, but I'm a huge Jonathan Blow guy. Braid was actually one of my first indie games, that and Meat Boy was my other one.
Yes.
And I think in a lot of ways those kind of fathered the entire indie video game industry. I think it all starts with Cave Story, to be honest, but it is very cool to see that Braid comes back around, and on top of that it has new discoveries to find, so I will definitely be showing up and playing that very soon.
Yes. Yeah, for me personally, that documentary indie game,
yes, available on Steam, by the way.
Yes, it changed my entire perspective of video games. Like to be able to listen to a creator of a game that, and clearly Jonathan Blow was so passionate about Braid, and you could really tell within the gameplay. Again, the music was awesome, the art style was great, the puzzles were great. But then going back, because I remember as a kid, I never finished the game. But then going back and watching, like, again, YouTube videos about, like, what the story really meant. And, like, if you 100% complete the game, how different it ends up being. Like, it was just, artistically, it changed my perspective in a lot of ways about what video games can do. So I'm so excited to think about the idea of all these new people maybe for the first time getting to experience Braid. It's very exciting. I'll definitely be picking it up.
It's funny because, we'll get into some news, but I'm getting excited, so I got to talk about it. That game has this thing where, a lot of times you'll complete a game and you'll get, like, a novelty hat or something. When you complete at 100% that game, your entire perspective on the video game changes. And I wouldn't say it was a life-changing moment for me, but I remember when it completed it, it felt like, oh my God, I never pictured it like that. How could I never picture it like that? And it is a... Jonathan Blow has done it with The Witness, has done it with Braid, and I don't know what he's working on next, but I will buy it. He is very good at giving you an expectation and then subverting it entirely. And a true... in my opinion, a true genius when it comes to video games.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right, for some news pieces, we're gonna get we're now from geniuses into a long-standing series. The new Assassin's Creed Shadow, has just had a premiere. The official trailer just dropped this week. It is set in feudal Japan, 1579 Japan, which is a completely different era and location than the previous games. And it is based on a main samurai protagonist called Yasuke, who is based off a historical figure, and a fictional character now, which will be the other shinobi protagonist. It comes out in November of this year. So, there was a time when Assassin's Creed games would come out every year. Now we wait a much longer time between them so that they can fine-tune them. And this is the perfect setting for me, because I wasn't really interested in the last few Assassin's Creed. I kind of took a step back after Assassin's Creed Black Flag. I believe that's what it was called. And so I've heard Odyssey is good, or that's what it's called. And yes, and I heard also that the what was the
Assassin's Creed Valhalla?
That's the one. So I played maybe an hour of that, and I liked it, but I just didn't want to consume more. This seems more of my type of video game. Have you watched the trailer?
Yeah, so I've seen small clips. I've not watched the trailer start to finish yet, but the second that I saw a couple of very short clips, and the picture that they're using to promote it, I instantly was like, oh, this is right up my alley. Again, I actually did put, I didn't finish it, but I did put a decent amount of time into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I really, really enjoyed it. Actually, gameplay wise, in many ways, it kind of reminded me of The Witcher.
Oh, really?
Actually.
Okay.
Yeah, but a beautiful world. Actually, when I got my Xbox Series X, the first game that I played was Assassin's Creed Valhalla. That was the first game that I put into my 9th gen system. The game is gorgeous. Again, voice acting is great, and more importantly, the world itself was like very interesting to want to explore. So I can only imagine what they're going to do with Assassin's Creed Shadows. But I think, again, based off what you said, Uno, the world, the environment is very interesting to me, and something I would love to jump into. So I pretty much guarantee I know I'm going to enjoy this game, and we'll definitely be checking it out.
Yeah, sure. I'll be giving this one a shot for sure when it comes out November 15th of 2024. Our next piece of news, this one is going to be on the weirder side of things, and hopefully you could fill in some of the gaps on this, because I think it's super interesting, but I also don't think I have the background on at least the console. It would seem that in Slovenia, you could record your radio channel, 89.3 FM. You could hit record on a cassette tape just this week, and if you recorded what the buzzing sounds that they played for that radio channel, it would be about 50 kilobytes of data, and then you can now take that tape that you got from the radio and play a 40-year-old game called Contraband 2, a Serbian video game that was exclusive for the ZX Spectrum. So, for a 40-year anniversary of that video game, and the way that it was originally published by a radio student, which both in physical copies and similarly over-the-air fashion. So it was done like that 40 years ago, and they've now done it again. So a cool little tidbit of if you wanted to download a text-based only game, you could do so over your radio. I had no idea that was actually a method that people downloaded video games at one point. Do you know anything about the ZX Spectrum?
So first of all, going off of what you said, I had no idea that was a concept either. It's absolutely wild that if you record a radio frequency, you can play this game. But the ZX Spectrum was actually an incredibly important 8-bit computer. So again, you know, a lot of people look at the Commodore 64 as being a super important early computer in the history of video games, which it is, no doubt. But the ZX Spectrum was really huge, especially in the UK, like a very, very important home computer. So again, to think that we're still paying tribute and showing some honor to a home computer like this is awesome. I actually have a book on the history of the Spectrum, which is pretty wild, that I'm still going through. So again, the ZX Spectrum, incredibly important in the history of video games, and just what an interesting way of having people play a game from this amazing computer. That's wild. That's wild.
I mean, just stories like that brings up a whole console generation that I know almost nothing about, but just the discovery of finding out that there was a time that's how you downloaded video games, like not over the internet, but through and you know, when we're talking about modem internet, a lot of the data is just a ping of sounds, right? Right. That's how you connected through AOL back in the day. So preceding even that, you could do it through the radio, and that's something I never would have thought of as a way to download video games. And it's cool that it is still employed today in somewhat of a tribute to this video game 40 years later.
It really is, you know, especially for this generation of games. Because actually, me and my brother were talking about this the other day, about like how many games that we have played when we were younger, and how many games have literally been lost to time. Especially in that era of early PC gaming with floppy disks or however you got your games. I can't imagine the amount of games that aren't around anymore that I wish so badly we'd be able to showcase. So I'm just glad. I don't know. To me, this is really exciting because it's continuing the preservation of this form of entertainment and art, really, that we love so much. So this is really cool. Really, really cool.
Yeah, we were big advocates of preserving video game history here. And neat to see that there's different ways of doing it, for sure. Another big story this week, PS5 hits 59 million sold as Helldivers also breaks the PlayStation launch sales records. This is pretty big because I'll just read the statement, and just the statement alone is pretty wild. Helldivers 2 is PlayStation's fastest selling game ever. The company announced in its financial records just recently, it achieved over 12 million copies sold in under 12 weeks, beating out the previous record held by God of War Ragnarok, which sold 11 million copies in about 10 weeks, roughly. This is obviously, the fiscal year ends at March 31st, 2024. And so the records, are skewed depending on releases and stuff like that. But it's insane to think that Helldivers, what is essentially a large AAA or whatever we call them nowadays, a large indie game, is outselling first-party PlayStation games. And that's all through the power of the PlayStation Plus downloads that you can get in the first month, and just having general fun with your friends. It's and the quality of the game itself. So it's very impressive. First of all, PS5 hitting 59 million sales is crazy. That means they sold 20.8 million PlayStation 5 consoles in the fiscal year for a lifetime of 59.3. So it is doing very well. But the fact that on top of that, Helldivers 2 has reached that insane level of sales as well is it's there's a lot. We've had a lot of bad news in the video game world recently, but it is nice to see that at least there is the appetite for video games is still there.
Yes, and honest to God, I think it always will be, and I think it's going to keep growing.
It has to. For sure.
I really, really do. It is the fastest growing form of entertainment by a mile. Again, we talked about this a little bit last week, but video games have only been around, and this is not even commercially. They've only been around 65 years or so, which is just unbelievable. But I did want to bring up this point, which is so exciting about Helldivers 2, is generally speaking, Uno, I know me and you have talked about this, but for the most part, I am a single player video game player. I'm not against multiplayer stuff, but generally speaking, when I sit down and I want to play a video game, I want to play a single player game and engage in a story and things like that. Helldivers 2 completely grabbed me. I could not wait to talk to my friends and be like, hey, do you want to get on Helldivers 2 tonight and do some matches and play some games? It was so easy to jump into. The rewards were really exciting, and clearly the rest of the world feels the same way. So again, the developers of this game have done a fantastic job, and this is so huge for PlayStation, and it's huge for video games, like you said.
For sure.
Yeah.
On the other side of things, Microsoft puts over 60 Xbox 360 games on sale ahead of the store shutdown. So if you did not know, starting on July 29th, 2024, Microsoft will stop supporting the ability to purchase new games and DLC and other entertainment content from the 360 store on the console and on the Xbox 360 marketplace, which you might know as marketplace.com or marketplace.xbox.com. This came out on an Xbox Wire announcement, but they published a list of on-sale video games that will go from June 18th to July 16th. With more games coming from June 18th to July 16th. And this does not mean that you will not be able to play those Xbox 360 games. They've gone and said that any game you've previously purchased will still be playable. You will not lose that data. It is still yours to own. But it now means that a lot of the Xbox 360 games, if you have not purchased them, will not be available on new console generations to be purchased in the future. Which, it sucks. But at least it's not like they are erasing them from history, you still get to play them. But now is your chance if you want to go back there and I mean, what game from 360? If you want to play the Simpsons game, or what? I mean, obviously, what are you're more an Xbox guy. What's your favorite Xbox 360 games?
Fallout New Vegas
is
one that sticks out. Fallout 3. A lot of the Gears of War titles.
Yes,
were also available on Xbox 360. Again, the Master Chief Collection exists, so we don't have to worry about that so much. But again, Xbox has done a really good job the past few years as far as showcasing and appreciating the history of their console. And there's been a lot of incredible games on the original Xbox, the Xbox 360, and things like that. So hopefully people will have the chance to pick some of these games up, because again, there's a lot of really incredible titles that you definitely want to grab and you definitely want to play.
So that's your chance if you would like to get an Xbox 360 game on current Xbox consoles. Do so before the end of July, because they will all be disappearing, and especially with 60 titles on sale, now is your chance to do so.
Yes.
Now we're gonna go into the movie world. This one's I'm a little excited for. Mortal Kombat 2, the movie sequel to the previous Mortal Kombat remake or restart of the series, gets a fall 2025 release date. Warner Brothers has announced that Mortal Kombat 2 is coming to theaters late next year in October 24th, 2025, including an IMAX reveal. This is penned by the writer of the Moon Knight movie, which I have not seen. It might have Carl Urban to play Johnny Cage, which I'm very excited about as well. And I mean, I don't know. You've seen the previous Mortal Kombat movie?
Yes.
I enjoyed it.
I did too. Yes. Yeah. I did. And going off of what we have kind of discussed the past few weeks with the video game adaptations lately, I can only imagine how great this movie's going to be. I think it's going to be a blast. I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, I watched that 2021 version, and I thought it was fun. Like, I remember Kano being a great highlight of the movie, and I actually liked the new character they introduced, and then later introduced into the video game. I thought it was a very good first step. I remember for the longest time, we come from the 90s, and so Mortal Kombat from 1995, Annihilation, and the animated movies. I love those movies, but truthfully, they don't stand the hands of time. They're not fantastic.
Uno, I'm totally with you. Yep. They're fun.
They're fun. Yeah, I mean, when you're us and you were playing those games on Super Nintendo or whichever console or at the arcade, it was cool seeing Sub-Zero. It's cool seeing Scorpion fight it out, duke it out, and have real combats and stuff. But a lot of those movies just don't live up to today's standard. And I thought that Mortal Kombat 2021 was actually pretty good. I don't think it is a Last of Us level, cinematic experience. But as far as something that is based on a fighting property, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm excited for the next one. I think more video game movies is never a bad thing, especially if they're going to give it enough love. So I'm looking forward to eventually watching this, and I'm wondering if that will also, bolster resurgence of fighting game movies. There's never been a Tekken movie, as far as I know. There was a long sword. There's a series of Street Fighter movies with, other than the 90s Street Fighter, I don't think there's a single one that's good, personally. But I feel like, if Mortal Kombat continues doing this and continues doing well, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the big three, like Tekken or Street Fighter, gets a new version as well.
You're right. That's a great point. I wonder if, based on the success of this movie, if that will translate to the Mortal Kombat franchise as a whole. If more people will end up purchasing the game and getting into fighting games, and also, like you said, the idea of them making a Street Fighter movie or a Tekken movie or Soul Calibur or something like that would be really, really cool.
Oh, my God.
But again,
Soul Calibur. I never even considered a movie. That would be incredible.
A Soul Calibur movie? Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. But again, I really do mean this. Like, anytime that video game adaptations get the chance to go into movies or TV shows, it has me excited. And I'm especially excited based on just how excellent a lot of them have been. So, yeah, it's exciting. I'll definitely be watching it. Yeah,
and you've talking about if it reflected in sales or anything, I would think so.
Right?
Yeah, I would think so for sure. And if you haven't played the recent Mortal Kombat games, the recent series is lore heavy and pretty cinematic on its own. Like, I haven't played through the story modes, but I've watched my wife play them, and I was like, man, I'm watching a story unfold with some of my favorite characters, and it's pretty seamless. How it goes from you fighting to your next cutscene into some pretty. They take a lot of liberties in the Mortal Kombat universe, but in a way that I'm like, you know what? Good on you for going in those directions, right? Because it gets weird and kooky, but that's kind of what I like with the Elseworlds for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to be talking about our favorite controllers over the last generations of video games right after this. And we're back. We're going to talk about some of our favorite controllers over the last few decades and decades of video games. This is a subject that we wanted to address because I know, Chugs, because we have preceded this with a little bit of a talk, I know you're going to disagree with me, but I am going to make the point anyways. I feel like nowadays, what a video game controller, if you're playing a PlayStation, you're playing an Xbox, a Steam Deck controller, a lot of it is based off the same principles. 2 triggers, a D-pad, 2 analogs, 4 buttons, faceplate buttons. There are some differences between each, and I know that you will probably speak very highly of the Xbox controller, while I will speak very highly of the PlayStation one. But you called it. In a lot of ways, I think the controllers are very similar in comparison to what controllers used to be.
100%.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's because, in the end, it is a lot simpler to have one game across several consoles if you have corresponding buttons for it. But I like wacky controllers. I miss the days of weird controllers. I'm talking like some of my personal favorites, and we can get into deeper conversations about each. Dreamcast controller with a built-in memory card that plays as its own controller, an own video game. It was one of the first consoles to have trigger buttons. I love the feel of, like, it was bulky, but not Xbox One bulky, but just like big enough. That feels a lot like today's, but at the time felt so foreign and alien. And my other very unique controller that I really like, and I think that is more a test of the times, and it's a nostalgic factor. But I love the N64 controller.
Completely agree.
It is such a weird, wacky controller because, like, even if you look at a picture of it, and I'm sure our team will edit in a picture of it at this point, and if they don't, I'm sorry. But it just doesn't look like a video gaming controller. But something about it feels so right. Like, when you're holding it, it feels like it makes sense. I don't think you could drop a controller like that nowadays.
No. And going off what you said with the N64 controller, again, don't get me wrong, the both of us are speaking on nostalgia, for sure. But as far as, like, a visual, to me, instantly, that controller just stands out. Like, even if you weren't a video game player and you saw a Nintendo 64 with that controller, I feel like anyone walking by would be like, what is this? It's there's something about it that just catches your eye. But again, is it the most convenient controller today? No. And I think Nintendo would completely agree. But you're right. There was something about that controller that I just loved. Everything about it. But for me, Actually, two. So my first console that I ever had was a Sega Genesis. And I actually prefer the classic 3-button Sega Genesis controller versus the 6-button Genesis controller.
Yes.
That one feels just better to me for some reason. To this day, even when I play Super Mario World, I make sure I play it at least once a year. That's my favorite 2D Mario of all time. The Super Nintendo controller, still, in 2024, is one of the greatest controllers ever made.
I have a USB version of it that I use for independent games because it just feels like, especially if you're playing a pixelated game, it feels wrong to not play it on one of those. Right?
Exactly. It does. It still to this day feels so good to use. But I think overall, and I mean this, and this is what I was talking about with the differences of Xbox and PlayStation, or what you kind of mentioned at the top of this. Again, a PlayStation controller, very comfortable. Pretty much all controllers right now are
nowadays
good and great to play with. Yeah. But I really love the location of the joysticks on the Xbox versus the PlayStation, where the PlayStation has the two joysticks right beside each other, and the PlayStation with the asymmetrical difference in their joysticks. That to me just feels so much more comfortable. But specifically, especially after getting very into Halo, I've gotten to a point now where it's so hard to not play not only first-person shooters, but really any game without an Xbox Elite Series 2 controller. That is my favorite controller of all time. I love the weight of the controller. I love that I've adapted myself to be able to use the back paddles and not having to move my thumbs off the joysticks whatsoever. It's especially effective when you're playing a first-person shooter. Like, for example, you can change the triggers where they're like a hair trigger where you barely have to press it, and then you can shoot or aim very quickly. Also, my right stick, I change to a high right stick. So it's more elevated. So there is more accuracy to when you aim and things like that. But the biggest thing for me is the paddles. I've gotten so accustomed to that now that I love that. And the fact that that is a situation now that is becoming much more prevalent in controllers going forward is awesome. I love the concept of paddles for sure.
Back in the day, I had one of those adjustable Mad Cat ones for the PS3.
Oh, the Mad Cats, yes.
And those were really cool. And I never really fully understood the differences while playing a video game until we started streaming weekly, doing All Elite Arcade at the Twitch version, and you would bring your Elite one to play Halo, and then every time I'd hold it, I'd be like, oh, this is why people change it. There is a unique feel to just you're so good with your thumbs on in one position, but tweaking it and then realizing oh, I can get a fraction more out of it. Right. I can get more of an aim with the extended because I assume for you, especially for that right thumb, the extended stick gives you more of a precise hold, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And it's so also cool that we're at that point. Sorry, keep going.
Right. No, 100%. What I was going to, because you brought up a legitimate true point where again, the right stick, the higher right stick does definitely make you aim a little bit better. But for me mentally, there's something about holding a controller that just weighs a little bit heavier, which may sound silly because obviously you'd want a lighter controller, I think, to play for a longer amount of time. But there's something about a controller just weighing a little bit more where it feels more, I don't know, durable. You just feel like you're ready to go. So I love the Elite Series 2. I love it so much. It's my favorite controller of all time. Yeah.
All time, really?
All time.
Hey,
yeah.
Big claim. I think it's cool that we're in a future now that video games have also become sports, esports, combat focus, and in the same way that some baseball players have an affinity for different type of bats and different weights and different lengths and different grips for it. Video games are the same way. thumbs can have different grips. You know, you can have a slide grip. You can have kind of a gritty grip so that you can, you know, have more of a texture to it. Buttons are the same way. Like, I like a clicky button, and some people don't. And you can actually edit some controllers to do that. It's the Steam Deck has all these back buttons that you can remap for everything. And I've changed entirely how I play video games since having a Steam Deck, because having those extra back buttons, I never realized how little these fingers do when I video game. And having an option to use these as quick actions, you know, because you can change them depending on the video games. You can go into your options and change what each button does for an input. That's changed how I address video games entirely. Like, it makes things more... It makes it more simplistic. It is more complex to add, you know, more button presses, but like you can determine specific actions to these new buttons as well. And it's very cool that we're in a world now that you can essentially go into a video game, but you're not defined by one way of playing it. You can actually mold it to your own personal preferences.
And Uno, speaking of controllers, I have a little history lesson for all the listeners here. So, the original Famicom, the Nintendo Entertainment System, but specifically the Famicom, released in Japan. The first series of that console was released with rubber buttons,
really,
instead of plastic buttons. Yes.
Nope.
And they changed it because so many, I guess a handful or quite a few people had complained that the controllers stopped working because the buttons would get stuck underneath instead of the plastic buttons. So they changed it. But just random side note, I think maybe that's one of my favorite collectibles that I have. I do have a first edition Famicom in my little video game library.
Do you have the rubber button Famicom?
I have the rubber button Famicom. Yeah. Found it. eBay's amazing. eBay
you can find all size stuff.
But again, controllers change all the time. We've seen so many differences in what people like and what they enjoy and things like that. But it's wild. They're constantly changing. I
can't imagine a world where video games were defined by rubber buttons, because, like, to me, that responsiveness of a click when you press in, that weight of clicking in and feeling the press, like, past the threshold. Nowadays, like, it's crazy because on top of all of these modifications that you can do to controllers, they've actually left it that, you know, a half press can mean one thing and a full press can mean another thing. Like like your trigger, and I haven't even talked about PlayStation's haptic feedback, which I think is an insane.
Oh my god!
Oh my, so cool. So cool. And rumble features, and like you know, I have Astro's Playground on PlayStation 5. You know, I thought the future video game wasn't even graphics. When I played that game, I felt like, okay, this is what the future video game is. It's just giving me more feel through my computer, my actual controller. But
Uno, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I seriously, generally speaking, I turn rumble off most of the time. Like on Xbox, Nintendo, on my Steam Deck, I turn all of that off. But on the PlayStation 5 with the haptic feedback, it's so good that I have to keep it on.
I love the feel of, like, especially because a lot of those first-person shooters, the right trigger is like cocking a gun, and like just that the fact that you have to press harder sometimes, and you'll feel like the give of it. It feels so cool that a little device is capable of doing that stuff. And like I said, for Astro's Playground, like just holding the triggers, and you would walk over sandy areas, and somehow the vibration would make it feel like you had sand textures on your fingers. Like, how do we do that? How is that a possibility nowadays? It's crazy.
It's so wild. Or like you play like Horizon Forbidden West, and you go to pull the bow back, and left trigger, it like you feel the pull the entire way.
Yeah.
It really feels like,
and it gets tighter as you get further, the same way it would be if you were doing your own.
But Sony crushed it with the haptic feedback.
I will say this, and this is a little bit of a complaint on Sony. I was so amazed by their tech demo Astro Playground that I thought, like, every game from here on is going to have this built in. And with the exception of like shooting a gun and there being like an understanding from developer to developer how to address it, I feel like I've played so many games and have just not been as shocked and surprised as that one game. And honestly, it's free. If you haven't played on PS5, play Astro's Playground. It's still one of my favorite experiences on PlayStation. And do more of that, please. There's something so different and unique to your controller PlayStation that we're not taking full advantage of. And I just want to put it out there because you are an Xbox man and you will like that controller. I think the PlayStation controller is, while simplistic, perfect. I love the touchpad. I love the light up part at the top. I love the share play button. I love all that stuff. It's a very and haptic feedback above all. But
Uno, I do agree with you in the sense of they set the bar so high with Astro's Playroom. Because I completely agree. The first time playing that game when I first got my PlayStation 5, I'm like, oh my God, this is wild. And nothing. I mean, again, of course, there have been incredible games on PlayStation 5. Like, such incredible games. But nothing has captured the haptic feedback option like Astro's Playroom has. Yeah. Nothing has. And I would love to see that again. I agree.
In fact, if anyone out there on our YouTube or on our podcast or anything, if there are other examples of video games that use it to its full extent, I would love to experience those. Do let us know. Send me a tweet. Put it in the YouTube comments down below. We will check it out because I've been craving that experience ever since I played it. Last little bit of information on controllers. We talked about our favorite controllers. We talked about remapping controllers. I've talked about changing the inputs. One thing that I know you and I differ on, and that's because we Twitch stream every single week, and we would switch controllers hand to hand. You're an inverted guy.
I am an inverted guy.
Yeah,
I am. I wish I could explain why.
I don't know. And I don't mean that as a slight to you. It's just like,
no.
I think everyone's brain is wired in one direction.
Yes.
I cannot break through it.
Because, for example, I can talk to one person who is like, oh my God, how in the world do you play inverted? And to me, my brain just does not process when I push up, I look up, and when I push down, I look down.
Yeah.
It feels like when I pull it back, I look up, and obviously inverted. But it's so wild how everyone's brains kind of work differently. But for me, I immediately, and now I've gotten to a point too, Uno, where even for some third-person games, if I'm aiming with any sort of a weapon, I have to change it to invert.
Because your instinct is to go in one direction, right?
It really is. It really is. And I've been an inverted gamer my whole life. I really have. Yeah. And because you're default.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a default man. I mean, I don't mean it as an insult, but yeah, I never changed any settings until recently, and the only stuff I do adjust on occasion, and this is mostly when I play PC stuff, is not if it's inverted or not, but I like to mess with sensitivity. Especially
I don't mess with that ever. Okay.
Especially some first-person shooters, I'll the reticle vision. I like to either. It depends on the game. I either like to pull back or I like to extend on it and make it much swifter. But I'd say almost always on a PC game, I end up reducing the distance from drag because I end up making such wildly fast movements that I want more. Like, I don't know. I like a slower approach, and I know that's not.
I agree.
That's not going to get me to the video game esports Hall of Fame for sure. But
of course.
But when I play, that's like it's something my brain can decipher a little better for sure.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, total side note, but I was talking to a buddy of mine about this the other day, where he was asking me why I love Halo so much. Again, aside from how incredible the story is, the characters, again, everyone knows, anyone who knows me knows that Halo is my FPS king. I love Halo so much. But I also appreciate it's a little bit slower paced.
Yes.
Like the super fast paced FPS games, I feel like I love them. Like I love Doom 2016. Yeah. I love Quake and Unreal Tournament. I love those games. But it's so quick that it's so hard for my brain to like catch up to it sometimes. Whereas Halo is like a little bit slower paced and easier for, I guess, my inverted brain to process, I think.
It also, like, Halo feels more deliberate in a lot of ways.
It does.
Like, every time you shoot a gun, it has, like, it has a feel to it that you're like, okay, it's going to do this, and I'm going to come back to it. Whereas...
Yes.
When I like Doom, I like Quake. I actually like the I love the like strafing first-person shooter games that you have to be in constant movement and stuff. But I feel like they're two different games entirely. We're talking about two different philosophies on first-person shooters. Personally, I actually like the Doom version more. But I like what I do like about Halo 2 is it's more of its like slow approach. And I wouldn't say I don't know why chunky is the word that comes to me, but it feels like it's more weight. There's more weight to everything you do in that game. Yes.
That is the perfect way to describe it. Yeah, because again, I'm like you, Uno, because I know you like Halo as well. And I also love like the faster paced FPS games also. But again, for me in my brain, that like slower, weightier, what you said with weight, that's the perfect description. That weightier feel of an FPS game is more enjoyable for me, I think. So, yeah.
Well, we're curious about your favorite video game controllers as well. Do let us know in our YouTube comments down below what you prefer. Also, are you inverted? Are you goofy footed? Sorry, I'm bringing back the skateboarder terms.
Hashtag inverted, hashtag default.
That's
Get
right.
It in the comments, baby.
Are you a default guy, person, or are you an inverted person? Let us know in the comments down below. Also, maybe you have a little tidbit in the accessibility menu that you think is better for certain games or better universally. Just recently I changed Fortnite to have on top of audio cues, it has a visual cue for video. It's changed. I was very good at Fortnite, and now I'm like incredible. I feel like I'm cheating because I could see footprints in a direction when someone's walking in a certain direction. It's changed the whole way I play. So if you have accessibility features that you like to add on or you like to change it in your controller, let us know down below. We'll be reading them in our youtube.com/AEW games. You can find us all podcasting places, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Spotify. We're available. Do hit that subscribe button, that follow button, whatever it is, so you could be notified of when our next episode is. You can find also AEW Games on all social media platforms. AEW Fight Forever is available on consoles right now. Season 4 is just dropping now. Some Mojo has been released about a week ago. In fact, I've been playing a little bit of it, and it is quite enjoyable. Joe has been very, very well done. And on top of that, Figure Fighters, our mobile game, is available right now on Android, iOS. Search AEW Figure Fighters if you'd like to do that. Both of us are in there. Chugs, where can we find you?
So once again, I do stream on Twitch. I try to stream at least a few days a week. It's twitch.tv/thechugs. So if you want to see me play either Dark Souls 2 or Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, actually my next stream is going to be some OG Silent Hill on the PlayStation 1. Feel free to stop by. But once again, that is twitch.tv/thechugs.
And you can find me at Evil Uno on all social media, including Twitch. I do a lot less Twitch streaming nowadays, but you never know when I might jump back on there. I might want to do that third phase of Animal Well in front of everyone so I could ask anyone some questions. Do leave us some comments, hit that follow button, and come back next week. We will be talking video games all over again because that is what we like to do. So we will see you next week. Bye-bye.